Hello, good morning everyone. Welcome to InsideHR, the series of webinars from HR Review that explore the latest topics, trends and issues affecting HR and management practitioners in the UK, and to our Childcare and Employers webinar this morning in association with My Family Care. My Family Care is all about making work and family work for both employers and their working parent and carer employees. They work with a huge range of clients, providing practical services such as backup care, through to coaching toolkits, webinars, individual and group coaching, family network events, and consultancy services. And we're delighted to be working with them once again this morning. For those of you that are familiar with InsideHR, we've done a series of these with My Family Care, and they're always great fun and really interesting. We're privileged to have a really knowledgeable panel with us today, and I'll introduce you to them in just a sec. But before I do, there's just time for me to tell you about how you can take part in our webinar this morning for those of you that may be listening for the first time. You can vote in our polls, the first of which we're going to launch in just a few moments by clicking on the vote button that you can see below the slide deck on your screen. Your responses to those questions really do shape our discussion over the next hour, so please do let us know your views on those. And like I say, I'll put the first one to you very shortly. We also always put aside time towards the end of the webinar, about 10 minutes or so at least, for you to put your questions directly to our panel. And you can do that by clicking on the Ask a Question button. That's below your slide deck as well. Hopefully you can see that there. And if you click on the Attachments button, you can download a great range of resources and links provided from My Family Care, including a guide to the changes to childcare vouchers and free childcare, the things that we're going to be talking about this morning. They've produced a guide that you can download there. And you can rate the webinar by clicking on the Rate This button. And we really do appreciate your feedback as always. And last but not least, you can follow our discussion on Twitter by following @HR Review or by searching the hashtag InsideHR. And so to our panel this morning, I'm delighted to be joined once again by an InsideHR veteran now, I guess, Jennifer Liston-Smith. Good morning, Jennifer. How are you?
Good morning, James. Good morning, all. I'm very well, thank you, and very glad to be back.
It's great to have you with us. Jennifer's part of My Family Care's senior management team. She's built and leads the coaching and consultancy services there, supporting leading employers to retain talented employees. She's a frequent conference speaker as well as appearing on InsideHR multiple times. She's a writer and media commentator on the topic of what employers can do to help people combine their career and their family life. We're also joined today by Richard Milligan, who's the relationship manager for voucher services and salary extras at Computershare. Sorry. Richard, good morning. How are you?
Good morning to you, James. Very well, thank you.
Great stuff. Welcome to InsideHR. Richard,
thank you very much.
As I said, is an employee benefits professional with 17 years of industry experience, and he's currently responsible for managing over 80 client accounts and knows the childcare voucher landscape inside out. So it's a real privilege to have him with us today. And last but by no means least, I have Lindsay Doe with us here today as well from Tiny. She's the director there. Lindsay, good morning.
Good morning, James. Good morning, all.
Great to have you with us, Lindsay. Like I said, the director of Tiny, Lindsay has over 20 years of experience in creating, delivering and managing a wide range of childcare programs. She's currently responsible for over 300 staff in 40 childcare settings, including creches, nurseries, holiday clubs, everything. So I hope you'll agree, a real expert panel for us to discuss this topic this morning. So let's move through to our agenda today. We're going to take a look at the changes coming into effect to childcare vouchers and to tax-free childcare, and also the 30 free hours of childcare, which we know has not much to do with employers, but will definitely have a bearing on the choices working parents are making when it comes to their decision on whether they're opting for free childcare or not, and how that's going to work. So we felt that it was really important to include that in the discussion this morning as well. We'll be looking at some of the relevant data from a recent benefits survey done by My Family Care, and that's going to be really interesting. Jennifer's going to break that down for us and unpack that for us as well. And, of course, also your questions at the end. But before we do all of that, we're going to launch and get you guys involved straight away with a poll. We've also got, we've just thrown up a slide on there that talks about some of the terminology we're going to be using today, because obviously I had to have this explained to me as well when we did our prep for this earlier this week. So childcare vouchers, often referred to as employer-supported childcare, or ESC. And not to be confused with TSC, which for me obviously stands for Tottenham Football Club. I don't know what that is for anybody else, but actually in this context stands for Tax-Free Childcare. So just a little pointer for some of those abbreviations that you might hear over the course of the next hour. So let's get to our poll. And we're asking you this quite simple question. Have you communicated with your employees about these expected changes? Option A, no, we're not planning any particular comms on this at the moment. B, not yet, but we are planning to. C, yes, we have given some basic information already. Or D, yes, we've provided full guidance to all of our people. So it'd be great to know where you are with that. So please do click on the vote button and let us know where you are with that. Okay, let's kick us off by looking at what's currently in place and what the changes actually are. Needless to say, with a topic such as this, it's both financial and it's legislative as well. So it's a little bit complex, but we're going to hopefully break that down and simplify it for you over the next hour. And we're going to, obviously, because of that, put a little bit more information on the screen than perhaps we normally would do with a regular InsideHR webinar. There is a lot to follow there, so do read through that as well as listening to what our panelists are saying. And you will be able to download the employer guide, as we said, which provides a lot more details. So that's available in the attachment link, and you can download that as well.
James, can I just
sure.
and say a couple of people have asked a question already to say there's music in the background and can anything be done at our end to suppress that? So I know Martin is supporting on the line. I don't know if
no, but my producer Martin will be tapping furiously away. We'll get him to look into that for us. So apologies for anyone experiencing that. Jennifer, we're all pretty familiar with childcare vouchers. They've been in place for quite a long time now. Let's first sort of look at how good they've been for employers and employees. Let's first turn to you, Jennifer, and while we bring Richard in on this as well, just give us a rough history of the childcare voucher and how good it's been for employers and employees.
Sure. I'll leave Richard, the expert, to tell us about the sort of nuts and bolts. But what I would say is it has been for many employers, from our recent survey, over 90% of employers have some sort of, this was 300 employers who responded to the survey, and over 90% have some kind of voucher scheme. And most have some sort of 5 to 10% level take-up of that scheme. So it's a minority, but obviously it's where it's taken up. It's a very straightforward way of signalling to your working population that you are a family-friendly employer and that you want to enable people to have their family life working well alongside work. And for that, it's been invaluable, really, because it's a way that employers can participate in that. And in a way, that's the big change as we move to tax-free childcare. That's between the government and the parents, and the employer doesn't get the chance to wave the flag about being family friendly. And I think that's one of the big things that has caused people to sit up and wonder what to do next. But perhaps over to Richard to look at the detail of how it's been.
Thanks very much, Jennifer. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a core employee benefit for a large majority of employers to offer for many years now to help support working parents and encourage them back to work after having children. And obviously, don't forget, there's been a very good incentive for employers to offer a scheme, as they've enjoyed employers' NIC savings on the total value of tax-free vouchers taken by their employees each month. So even for some of the smaller businesses that we work with, it can run into thousands of pounds each year. And whilst I know that's not a cash balance that sits in a bank account within a company's balance sheet at the end of the year, it's money they don't have to pay across to the revenue in the form of NI savings. So it's been a very valuable benefit from that perspective. And childcare vouchers alone has been, from a salary sacrifice perspective, by far the biggest savings mechanism as far as employees and I are concerned, because obviously you can salary sacrifice other things like bikes, pensions, computers, things like that. But childcare vouchers has been head and shoulders above that in terms of the savings and the take-up. So once CSC closed to new joiners in April next year, those employee savings will start to reduce as people leave or decide that TSC offers better financial value for them than ESC does.
Okay, and so, seeing as it's been such a central pillar, Richard, what is it that's really driving this change from the government?
So you'd have to go back to early 2013 when the government first made the announcement that they were looking to bring in a replacement to ESC. And they outlined TSC at the time, and to be honest, it hasn't changed a lot from when they outlined the rules and the makeup of the scheme in the last 4 years or so. So they undertook some research on the use of ESC arrangements prior to the proposal, And they believe that the revised subsidy approach will offer savings to around 5 times the number of working families who currently receive support through the ESC mechanism, so through the inclusion of the self-employed population and what they believe to be a low uptake in SMEs. And I'd have to agree with the last point. SMEs sometimes see a sort of a lower uptake whereby they perhaps haven't done as much to sort of promote and communicate the benefits to employees. So yes, for sure, parents with the sort of 0 to 5, the nursery age children, they're generally aware of childcare vouchers, but what we see a lot of drop off is when little ones start school, they start reception, parents tend to stop taking vouchers even though they can continue using them for things like after school clubs, holiday clubs, extracurricular stuff and things like that.
So Jennifer, is this something that My Family Care are seeing with their clients as well, that perhaps there's a slight comms issue around working parents understanding how long they can use their childcare vouchers for?
Yes, and I think that has been down to some extent down to the sliding timescales around this. So many employers have been actually quite well prepared and ready to communicate, but uncertain about the timeline. And I'm looking at a little preview here of the results that are coming in on that first poll, and I can see that over half are planning to communicate something about this, and I think most people are, there's a lot that HR people have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and this is one of the many, and hopefully from today there'll be a bit more clarity in order to put that message out. But I know it is one where employers are saying, we've been the hand holder of working parents for all this time by providing vouchers. We now need to advise them, point them in the direction of what will be better for them. And many employers are also saying, I'm sure Richard would support this, that actually since there is a window in which you can get on board with vouchers, why not do that as a gesture while you can?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry, Richard, carry on. No, carry on.
I was just going to agree wholeheartedly there. I think we're seeing a huge effort now for employers to really sort of get in and maximise the uptake between now and April next year for obvious reasons.
Fantastic. And like Jennifer says, we really hope that everyone listening today does go away with some key pointers on how they can start to communicate these changes. Speaking of which, we've just thrown the next slide up on the screen that they can see now, which is with the introduction of Tax-Free Childcare, that will affect who's able to carry on joining the existing scheme and how that. Richard, just take us through how that's going to work from April next year.
Yeah, okay, no problem. I mean, TSC is going to work entirely different way to ESC. Rather than the current gross salary deduction arrangement, which ESC is, which attracts income tax and NI relief, the new TSC account will allow anyone to pay funds into it, so not just the parent or the employee. The financial benefit of TSC is that for every £4 paid into an account, the government will top that up with an additional £1 up to a maximum of £2,000 per child per annum. So that's a 20% subsidy. So you can compare that more or less directly to the 32% saving a basic rate taxpayer would make under ESC, or a 42% saving if you pay tax at the higher rate. Another key distinction is that TSC requires an individual account to be opened up for each child, as opposed to ESC, which is obviously just one account per parent, regardless of the number of the children. So if you've got 3 children, you need 3 separate accounts. And just to clarify the TSC subsidy arrangement, you'd have to pay in £8,000 of your own net salary, or wherever that salary is coming from, per child per annum to receive the full £2,000 government subsidy.
Okay, and Richard, just to pick up on that point at the bottom of this slide here, a key change of this is going to be that there's going to be a lessened and eventually no role for the employer in this scheme, because obviously that's our main audience here. So how is that going to work?
Well, that's absolutely right. Obviously, under ESC, the employer is integral to managing the scheme. They're
Sure.
managing the payroll deductions. They're collecting the instructions from employees in many cases. They're processing the payroll deductions, sending it off to the childcare provider. They're doing none of that under TSC. They completely drop out of the loop. I have to say, I have come across a handful of clients in my territory who have looked at the option of running a net payroll deduction on behalf of the employee and then sending funds across direct from payroll across to their TSC account, which is probably, that's a nice arms around things to do, but I have to say they're in a very small minority.
Okay, and let's talk pros and cons. So obviously there's going to be pros and cons for both schemes depending on personal circumstances, aren't they, Richard? Just go into a little bit about what kind of personal circumstances we're talking about.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the primary benefits are, it'd be available to a lot more working families than those who currently have access to ESC. HMRC estimate that's around 2 million working families in the UK. Obviously making savings of up to £2,000 per child per annum. So dependent on circumstances, that may potentially be a lot more beneficial than the tax and NI relief they currently get.
Sure.
And TFC, obviously, it's open to self-employed individuals as well, which hasn't been the case previously. It's also accessible to lower-paid employees or those receiving statutory pay, so it's more inclusive from that perspective. Parents with higher childcare costs are likely to benefit from TFC, as are those with larger families.
Fantastic. Okay, so they're the pros. Let's talk a little bit about what the possible cons might be as well.
Sure. Yeah, obviously there's always a flip side, and there's two sides looking at this. So there are some constraints. So unlike ESC, both parents must be working in order to take part in TFC. And in addition, as I mentioned earlier, both parents must be part of the same scheme. So if one parent decides that they wish to sign up for TFC and their partner's in an ESC scheme, that partner has to then exit the ESC scheme. You can't use TFC if you or your partner, it says additional rate taxpayer on the slide, but it's actually if you're paying over £100,000 a year, you're excluded from taking part in TFC. That's per individual. So if either partner earns over £100,000, they're excluded. There's probably a lot more work to do for the parent in comparison to ESC under TFC. Whilst the employer childcare voucher provider manages the bulk of the administration, TFC requires participants to self-assess on a quarterly basis to certify that they're eligible to take part in TFC for the coming quarter. So that's likely to be a bit more work involved. The age limits are slightly different. It's up to 12 with TFC as opposed to 15 under ESC. And importantly, the accounts in TFC, they're not transferable, so you can't use funds in one child's account to pay childcare for another child's childcare, if that makes sense. So
sure,
not as flexible.
Okay, yeah. So each account is relevant to a particular child, which is a change from before as
That's
well.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Richard. I'm going to turn to Lindsay very shortly to talk about the 30 hours of free childcare as well. But before we do that, I want to bring in the results of our first poll. So remember, we asked you about the communication level, what you've communicated so far to your employees about these changes. And Jennifer gave us a sneak preview earlier, but we've just closed that poll now. Remember, we asked, have you communicated with your employees about these expected changes? Answer A, no, we were not planning any particular comms on this. B, not yet, but we're planning to. C, yes, we have given some basic information. Or D, yes, we've provided full guidance to our people. So, interesting this. So just 4% have said that they provided full guidance, which I guess is a good indicator of where everybody's at with these changes at the moment, because people are still working to understand them. 23% said yes, we've given some basic information. So that's quite good. Almost a quarter of our audience have already started to communicate with their employees about this. 17% say they're not planning any particular comms. Maybe that might change at the end of the hour when they've listened to all the things that we're going to tell them. But 56% are saying not yet, but we are planning to. Jennifer, to bring you back in on this very quickly, over half of our audience saying they haven't managed to communicate anything yet, but they know that they need to.
Yes, absolutely. And I could see a question being asked earlier about, which parents will be better off under Tax-Free Childcare, and I think that's the sort of million-dollar question, although hopefully won't be a million-dollar difference. And that is one of the things that individual parents may well have to work out for themselves, but the employer can help by pointing people in the right direction and helping them think about the pros and cons. So I think that's the kind of level of detail people will be looking to communicate when they do.
Absolutely. Just to move us on to our second poll, we've obviously asked you about your communication about the changes, but also there's an issue of addressing how the loss of ESC and how you're going to be dealing with that in your organisation. So this is a very simple question again. How are you planning to address the loss of ESC? Option A, no, we're not planning to do anything in particular. B, we're not sure yet, we're still deciding. C, we're re-promoting our existing benefits for our working parents. Or D, we're looking at the new benefits and policies for our working parents. So again, let us know where you are with that. It's really interesting to see where the audience is so that we can obviously address the things that you are looking at. And again, we'll maybe run that for slightly longer. We'll give you about sort of 20, 25 minutes to get involved with that poll. But please do get voting as we go. All right.
James, if I could just interrupt,
sure.
if I may, for a moment to say, if you have been looking at the voting results on your screen and you want to get back to the slide deck, just click the close button, which I think will be top right on that screen, and then that takes you back
we always
to the
do get
slide.
one person asking us how they do that. Yeah, you've just got there's a cross, I think, or you can just click on the vote button again, and it'll remove that and bring the slide deck back up for you. Okay. Lindsay, thank you for waiting so patiently while we ploughed through some of the pros and cons of the new scheme. We want to talk about 30 hours of free childcare. The childcare vouchers aren't the only changes afoot at the moment. Lindsay, tell us a little bit more about the changes that are coming into effect this autumn about 30 hours of free childcare that parents can claim.
Great. Sure. Okay, so currently all parents receive 15 hours of free childcare for children aged between 3 and 4. So the entitlement starts the term after the child turns 3, and that is going to remain the same. And currently most providers provide you with 15 hours of childcare over 38 weeks of the year. And this is known as the universal entitlement. So most parents, as I say, will be familiar with that, maybe claiming that already or looking to claim it as their child reaches 3. From September 2017, all eligible parents will then be able to extend from 15 hours up to 30 hours of free childcare a week. Now again, that may be over 38 weeks, and I'll explain about why that may change in just a moment. So for eligible parents, they'll be able to double their entitlement, and this will be known as the extended entitlement. And it's used exactly the same way as the 15 hours is now. So it has to be in an Ofsted registered setting. So that typically is nurseries, childminders and preschools. So very rarely it can't be used for in a nanny environment. And it's going to work in exactly the same way again as it does now. So for 15 hours at the moment, you apply per term. It will work the same as tax-free childcare. So you will register to see that you're eligible, and then you receive your code to give to your childcare provider. In terms of who's entitled to the additional 15 hours, it's based on a number of criteria. Two of the biggest ones are both parents must be working, or if it's a sole parent in a lone family, they must be working. And each parent, as Richard said, is on an annual income of up to £100,000 per person. So it's capped at £200,000 per household.
That's really interesting. So the eligibility criteria is actually very similar to the new changes coming in that's replacing the vouchers as well. We've got the two terms. We've got the universal entitlement, which is the 15 hours currently in place, and then the extended entitlement, which is the extra 15 hours that's going to make it up to 30 for the parents that are eligible. We're obviously talking about quite a number of parents. We're only talking about the ones that earn over £100,000 that are going to be not eligible, Lindsay. Is that right?
That's right. That's correct.
Fantastic. So let's talk about how you can use tax-free childcare alongside this. So these two schemes are obviously parents are going to be eligible for both in some senses. So just talk us through how they're going to work sort of together.
Yeah, sure. So parents can use tax-free childcare or childcare vouchers alongside their 15 hours or, if eligible, the 30 hours of free childcare. And they will pay for the additional, what we call the wraparound hours. So outside of their 15 or 30 hours, the additional hours that they need in order to do their job, they'll be able to pay through the tax-free or the childcare vouchers. So it will work again in the same way as it does now, but obviously with the introduction of tax-free vouchers, they've got to make the choice of which way to go. The 30 hours will remain, as I say, for parents to claim as they feel that they need to. The tax-free childcare can't be used alongside universal credit or tax credits, and that's quite important to be aware of. So they've always got their 30 hours, but they can't use the other way. And parents who remain eligible will be able to use it as they do now in their nursery, childminder or their preschool.
Fantastic. And just because obviously we're going to have lots of people listening from all around the UK, there are some slight differences to the way that you claim that depending on whether you're in England or whether you're in Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland.
That's correct. Yeah, so it's going through, I mean, we refer to Ofsted, but it's going through the local legislative authority. So it's the CSSIW in Wales, it's the Care Inspectorate in Scotland. So it would be a case of working with your local childcare provider to work out exactly what you're able to claim, whether you're able to claim the 15 or up to the 30 hours, and going through the eligibility criteria. But that criteria remains the same across the UK.
Fantastic. Okay, so thank you so much, Lindsay. That was a really clear overview of what's obviously quite a complex new piece of legislation that's coming in, and this is going to be coming in from this autumn. So, no, thank you so much for explaining that. Let's move it on and talk a little bit about what employers, because obviously this is something that maybe doesn't directly affect employers, but their employees are going to be making choices about this, and they're going to be thinking about this. So it's really important that employers know what is going on. But what does it actually mean for employers themselves? Lindsay, again, putting yourself in the position of an employer, obviously we've got lots of HR practitioners listening to us at the moment. What kind of awareness level do employers need to have, and what should they be doing to support their employees?
Employees should encourage their parents to go out and speak to their current childcare providers to ask firstly how they're applying the 30 hours and also if they're applying the 30 hours. A number of childcare providers at the moment are trying to work out how they're going to offer the additional hours that parents may be eligible for. Many nurseries are looking at how to fund the shortfall between their current fees and what the government are going to pay per space. And it's likely that nurseries will be charging for extras. Things like food is an obvious one. So parents, where they're used to paying their fee and everything's included, suddenly their nursery providers may be turning around saying, if you're eligible for 30 hours, you will now be charged additional fees for the likes of food. Or they may be going out, a number of nurseries are going out asking parents for voluntary contributions per month to help sustain the 30 hours implementation. So this means in reality that a number of parents won't be getting 30 hours of free childcare because of the shortfall in fees. Childminders are likely to be able to offer it because their fees aren't as high as a nursery, and there's a number of preschools across the UK that have refused to offer the additional hours. So from an employer point of view, I think it's really important for them to be saying to parents, go out, speak to your current childcare provider. Don't assume you are going to get 30 hours of free childcare because it may be a time that parents need to ask that question and make the decision whether they can afford not to receive that or to look for a childcare provider that's going to offer that entitlement.
Sure, and so the key message is that they need to be planning ahead, and they need to be doing that now, ahead of these changes coming in. Richard, if I can just turn to you as well, understanding and planning ahead is key from all perspectives on this as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. You said it. I mean, it's difficult to know for many employers what good uptake looks like from their childcare voucher scheme if they're not recording information about, how many employees have children of a qualifying age. But they've got between now and April 18 to maximise the uptake. So I'd encourage employers to engage with their childcare voucher providers to ensure they're doing as much as they can to promote the benefits of ESC and encourage anyone who is eligible to sign up. There's no downside, obviously, for an employee signing up for ESC if they haven't already done so. In fact, on the contrary, they'll benefit from having a choice of which scheme they take part in post-April 2018 when the new scheme kicks in. But if they don't sign up for ESC before the cut-off date, they'll have missed the opportunity, and the only option available to them will be TFC. And the other point I want to make is that employers should ensure they've shared as much information on TFC with their employees as possible. So that they can make an informed decision on which is the best scheme for them. There's some really good tools out there. HMRC themselves have produced two very good tools, a calculator and a Childcare Choices link website, which I gather will be available in the download document, which would be a good starting point for anyone who's got questions over which is the best scheme for them. And the other thing is, why not ask your childcare voucher provider to deliver some awareness sessions or a presentation to employees if there's an appetite for them to understand the changes. It's the best way of really communicating and answering questions.
Fantastic. And Jennifer, just to bring you in as well, I'm sure you would echo that message, and that's what you're doing with your clients, talking to them about clearly communicating the coming changes and the differences between these two schemes.
Well, that's right, James, absolutely. And we often provide pro bono webinars in My Family Care. We're kind of famous for our webinars, not only these for the HR community, but those for the individual parent and carer, which we provide to lots of our clients. But we provide occasional pro bono ones, which are free to access. And so on the 19th of July, there will be a pro bono webinar for employees around this topic. So those of you, I can see many questions coming in saying, how can we communicate this succinctly? Well, hopefully that no-cost webinar will be one of the tools in your toolbox which you can point employees to. And we will put info about that in the FAQ guide, which I can see, need to circulate after this event because there are so many detailed questions. And we will, as Richard says, put in there the details of the HMRC guide, and indeed Computershare's TFC microsite, which is has the address giveyourselfachoice.com, which is nice and easy to remember. So there will be all of those links. And just while I'm speaking, a couple of you have said you're having difficulty downloading the attachments. So just to reassure you, we can circulate those after the event. So don't worry if you can't access them. Just drop us a note, or we can circulate them anyway as part of the event follow-up. And some of you are asking for the slides, but actually what's in the slides is covered in the download, so you will have all of that info.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got that guide from My Family Care on the attachments that you can download there with all of that information. And also, I'm guessing these webinars, Jennifer, are going to be available through the My Family Care website?
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay.
James, could I just interject there?
Absolutely.
Just something on what Richard said, and to reiterate it, I think, again, for the employers to go out so that parents can make really good informed decisions. A number of parents look, and as say Richard spoke about it earlier, a number of parents look to stop their entitlement to ESC or think they don't need it once they receive their free 30 hours. And I think something that he said there, and is something so important because we find it as an operator all the time, is that it's really sensible for parents to continue contributing to their childcare voucher scheme, whether it's a minimal amount a month. And the reason being, beyond that 4th year when the child, after they're 4 and they go to school, a number of parents need wraparound care, the after school, the school holidays, and that's where that pot that they've been saving can start to be used again. But as I say, as a provider, we find a number of parents stop that because they think they don't need it anymore. It's just making sure employers are getting their employees to think ahead beyond that 3 to 4 year.
Absolutely. No, what's coming through very strongly from all three of you is this need to start reviewing family-friendly provisions that your organisation are providing right now, and to start this communication process. Because, like we said at the top, it is a complex issue. We are breaking it down and simplifying it, and we know that more clarity is going to emerge over the coming weeks and months. But it is a complex issue. Some HR teams may be slightly intimidated by this issue, and it is just important to get to grips with it really quickly and to start communicating it straight away. Jennifer, any tips for the people listening now about how they can start to do that, the kind of methods they can use to start communicating this information?
Sure. I mean, one of the things that we're really aware of as My Family Care, when we partner with employers, they have a portal website that we provide that has a range of resources from, practical solutions like backup care through to kind of coaching and developmental webinars and so on. And one of the things that we're doing is identifying all of those through that site that are parents, because not everybody is completely aware of their working parent populations, but we can find that population within our clients, and they may not all be signed up to vouchers, but either way, if you have a method like that of finding out who the working parents are, and obviously if you have a population of people signed up to vouchers, then they are the people to communicate, even if you're saying we are gathering information on this and we are going to communicate further, just to let people know that something is coming. And another place, not everybody on the line will have a parents network within their organisation. Sometimes depends on size of organisation and so on. But many organisations increasingly do have networks where parents can meet up, whether it's informally, whether it's online through some kind of social networking website that they provide internally. And that's exactly the place to let people know about resources, whether it is the webinar that's coming on the 19th of July, whether it's a guide that you produce internally. So to identify your working parent population and put the message out to them. And just a couple of more questions that have come in about the webinars. Will the free webinar on the 19th be recorded? It will be, and it will be available as a listen again. And this webinar today, you only need to revisit this site in order to listen again to it, the link that you're on today. So some people are saying, well, what if we want our managers to hear about this? So they can certainly be directed to that. And that's another thing that we would always say. It's like we did when shared parental leave was on the horizon.
Oh,
One of the key places to look is, are your managers well equipped? Because goodness knows, as managers, we are all very busy. There's lots coming at us. There are results to deliver. If you can equip a manager with a simple, even if it's a set of links that they can point people to, so that manager, when they have the conversation, they're nice and clear, they can show that they're supportive, and they can signpost people. And so I think that having a little bit of a brief communication for managers, even if it's just to say signpost people here, that would be a great step.
Absolutely, and I think that's a key theme of InsideHR in general. As we've done these, we've found whatever topic we're talking about. Often we find HR practitioners saying, "We understand this, we get this. Tell us how we get our managers to get it." That's communicating these changes and devolving that to line managers is something that obviously with every issue, whether it's performance management, whether it's recruitment, or whether it's family-friendly policy, that is something that our audience are really, really interested in. Let's just
I think
quickly,
that's right, James.
sorry,
Just a little bit further on that. When shared parental leave was coming in, those organisations that did really well at getting people engaged with shared parental leave were those where they had an expert in HR. So if you can possibly, and it might be yourselves who are sitting on the line today, if you can identify a go-to person, so you can say to managers, you can say to individuals, ask Nikki, ask Sunita, go to this person and they can answer questions. That's a huge help.
Fantastic. I just want to very quickly, before we move on from this, talk about the benefits for employers, because maybe there are people listening who are going, okay, this all sounds very complex, it all sounds like quite a lot of hard work. What's in it for us as an employer, communicating all of these changes, facilitating all of this? Jennifer, can you, and I'll bring Richard in on this as well, can you just talk a little bit about what the benefits are for an employer by making sure they're ready for this and making sure that they're filling in their employees on how they can benefit from this?
Yes, I guess because there is something that existed that was administered by the employer in the shape of the vouchers scheme, there is a kind of compulsion really to inform the people using it that it is changing, that it is coming to an end. So it's partly that, it's partly just, must do, but it's also about, as we touched on at the outset, being a family-friendly employer, signalling to employers that you do actually genuinely get the challenges, the demands around juggling work and family, and you want to help. So anything you can do that communicates this and signposts people puts a huge tick in that box. If you can go one step further and say, and actually, we are developing a family network, or we are training managers, or we are doing this or that for families. We are putting a page on our intranet with all the resources available for working parents and carers. If you can launch something else that helps people see how you are a family-friendly employer, then that's an extra step beyond as well.
And Richard, has that been your experience that, companies that really do invest time and effort in communicating these changes and providing in general a really strong family-friendly outlook to their HR policies and procedures and to their company ethos as a whole, really do start to reap the benefits of that in terms of engagement, in terms of recruitment as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's no surprise that they do. A client of mine works tirelessly trying to sort of promote, but certainly communicate the changes around TSC. I've done probably upwards of 10 sessions with their employees since 2013, and what I've seen is a real uptake in their existing scheme, sort of up to 15% over that sort of period. So it really does sort of, it's no surprise that that's the case. But, from our perspective as a provider, what we don't want and what we don't want to hear is post-April 2018 employees coming back to their employers saying, you didn't make me aware of these changes, you didn't let me know what was going on. So we really just must do as much as we can as a provider, certainly help our employers, our companies, to spread the message, get as many tools out there by whatever means, not trying to reinvent the wheel in terms of communication. What works for them, let's use those channels and make sure we get that information fed down it.
Brilliant, Richard. And that segues us very nicely into bringing us our poll results. Remember, the question that we asked, we're asking our audience was, how are you planning to address the loss of ESC? We asked A, we're not planning to do anything in particular. B, we're still not sure yet, we're still deciding. C, C, we're re-promoting our existing benefits for our working parents, or D, we're looking at new benefits or new policies for our working parents. A bit of a bigger spread here. Let's bring you the results now. So answer A, we're not planning on doing anything in particular, 22%, which is interesting. Option B, we're not sure yet. We're still deciding, 56% again. So there's a lot of people still in that space where they're not sure how to communicate it. They're not sure what they're going to do, but they are interested and motivated by the changes to start talking to their employees. Just 13% are re-promoting their existing benefits for working parents, and just 9% are looking at new benefits and policies for our working parents. Jennifer, a quick reaction from you to those results?
Yes, I mean, I think it matches up fairly well with the poll that we ran earlier.
Yeah.
That people, the majority of people are here today because they are looking for what next, and hopefully getting a bit of clarity on that today. And I think, that's exactly where we would hope people would be. We want to do it, we want to get it right, and we want to get our facts straight before we communicate. So I think that's positive in terms of the cons. In terms of replacing it, the fact that people are still unsure is, a reasonable response. And we're going to, in a moment, come on to our recent survey, and that will perhaps give some ideas on the kinds of things that employers are doing, because very much coming back to what Richard was saying before about the communication of this being not just must communicate in order to cover ourselves, but it is about attraction and retention and engagement. For many organisations now, it's almost become a hygiene factor to do something around working families. And if you're not doing it, people notice because your competitors are doing it, and your talent can leak away to somebody who gets this better. So I think there is a real need to be thinking hard, as evidently people are.
Yeah, it's an employee expectation now, isn't it? That takes us very neatly into talking about the survey that My Family Care have done. Jennifer, you've run a benefit study in this area that you're going to be publishing shortly. Just tell us a little bit about it, what you studied and what the results were.
Sure. So every couple of years we like to look at this, because it's one of the things that our clients most often ask us, as you can imagine, because we're in the privileged position of having a real overview and a knowledge of what best practice, what leading practice looks like. People are always asking, well, what do others do? So this is how we find that out, and we can anonymously publish the results. And over 300 employers took part in this survey, and there will be 2 releases of results, one around the kind of childcare vouchers response, and another around maternity, paternity, shared parental leave policies, a benchmark of who's doing what on that. And in the first instance here, we can see, as mentioned earlier, that over 90% of these 300 employers do have a voucher scheme in place, and they are, concerned. We asked them on a scale of 1 to 10, how concerned are you about the loss of it and about communicating it? And over 40% of those respondents rated their level of concern as 7 or above on the issue of, how do they keep involved in supporting childcare needs for their employees. So it's something that's on people's minds. If you've already been doing this, you've been getting the halo effect. But if you don't have that anymore, what will you do? Which kind of leads us on to a nice little snapshot. There'll be a great deal more detail when we do publish the survey, and if you're signed up for the My Family Care newsletter, you will get that sent to you. And you can sign up when you come to our site to get the downloads. You'll find a way to sign up for that newsletter. And so when we publish this, you'll see more of the kind of granular detail. But on screen now, I'm afraid it's a little bit small, but just reading out a couple of those things. 66% of those 300 companies are saying they have some kind of EAP program at the moment.
Sure.
An employee assistance program, which is a very, again, it's sort of entry-level support. Some EAP schemes are fantastic and really, really helpful. And for some employers, again, it's a kind of hygiene factor. So for some, that's the sort of toe in the water to how do we support our employees. For some people, it's regarded as a really full solution. But the companies that are perhaps leading the way and going further are obviously demonstrating a flexible working culture, making sure that working parents and carers have opportunities to work in a more agile way, to control how their working arrangements fit with family, as well as obviously majoring on how they deliver in their roles. But, the companies that are leading the way see that's a really important plank in how you cater for working parents and carers as well as the rest of your workforce. But there's other things that the companies are doing in this survey already, and other things that they're considering, which are, promoting things like additional holiday, promoting unpaid parental leave, different ways that people can gain more flexibility around how they work, having events for families, having networks for families, and of course things like coaching and training, and particularly training for managers. And it was really interesting in the survey when we asked people, what are you considering doing? Around about nearly half, 40%, are not considering putting more things in place. Obviously, some of them are already doing them, so they don't need to consider. But where they are considering more promotion of working parents' services and solutions, they're thinking about flexible working, they're thinking about different types of leave. Coaching and training managers comes higher up the list when we ask, what are you considering? And actually one of the things that we see increasingly is people putting in place, whether it's coaching provided obviously by a provider like ourselves, but also internal buddying and coaching schemes seem to be on the rise. And that is something that you can do quite informally, or you can do it in a more mentored, guided way by someone like ourselves. And that's something that seems to be coming up. How do you help parents help each other and share knowledge and experience?
And I was going to ask you, Jennifer, just to break in there, I was going to ask, there's obviously a huge range of different things that organisations are doing there. From my family care's work and from your experience, I'm guessing it's not a one-size-fits-all. I'm guessing that there are lots of different initiatives, different things that companies are doing that might work for them, but might not work for a different company. So what kind of things can companies do to sort of assess what the right initiatives and options are for them?
Yeah, I think that's really crucial, James. And often the beginning of our relationship with the client is to facilitate some kind of round table of all the key stakeholders involved, including obviously working parents and carers, but senior people at various levels and in different parts of the organisation, and to look at what are our current strengths, what are the gaps. I think that's a really crucial starting point. And I remember sitting down facilitating a group with a fast-moving consumer goods group, which had the really simple outcome of saying, well, actually, we have a lot that we provide, whether it's vouchers, whether it's services like My Family Care. They are a client of ours. We're providing backup care. We're providing help in finding childcare. We're providing various other services. But these were not centrally promoted in one obvious place. So the outcome for them was re-communicate what we're doing. For some people, it's as simple as saying there must be one page on our intranet that's the go-to place for them people to find other things, whether it's services, policies, benefits. So sometimes it's quite a simple thing like that comes out. Sometimes it's let's produce, the clearest, most enabling checklist for managers. And obviously other times it's let's have a parents and carers network, let's have coaching around the maternity-paternity transition. So there may be many different aspects. And obviously, as mentioned earlier, it might be childcare. If you're not providing, you're not the conduit, if you like, you're not the channel for childcare vouchers, can you be the employer that provides an amazing benefit like backup care? So when people's care arrangements fall over, it's one of the core services that My Family Care provides. Can you provide a service which will help people out like that in an emergency, in unforeseen circumstances? So there are lots of things that you can put in place, from the no cost and low cost through to the more kind of, wraparound support. There are many, many choices. And as you say, James, it's about sitting down, first of all, with the stakeholders and finding out what do we do well, how do we communicate that better, what are the gaps? And, many times we're also helping organisations survey their working parents. We've done many surveys where we're helping set up a working parents and carers network, and we go out to that network and we say, what are the topics on your mind? How would you like to meet? Do you want to meet in the room with lunch? Do you want to actually just drop into a webinar so people all around the different locations can get together? So consulting and identifying a few, to coin a phrase, low-hanging fruit solutions is definitely a good way forward.
Fantastic. And just a quick reminder of when you're going to be publishing the full survey and how people can access that.
So that will be coming out in the next couple of weeks through the My Family Care newsletter. So if people go to under the attachments link to our site to get the download, you will find a way of signing up to the newsletter so that you'll be able to get that when it comes out.
Fantastic. All right, I just want to spend, we've got just over 11 minutes left. Obviously, we want to move into questions relatively soon. But I do just want to bring everyone together now and just talk about, just sort of conclude this really and say, is this going to be a massive headache or is this going to be an opportunity? I imagine there's a lot of people who will have started the webinar, this morning thinking, oh my God, this is going to be a huge headache. How am I going to solve this? Actually, we can present this as an opportunity in many ways. And Richard, if I can bring you back in, just describe how this is an opportunity for employers.
Yeah, very much so. I think it's an opportunity in a couple of ways. Firstly, to sort of relaunch their existing childcare voucher scheme in a way, if you like. So just to make sure that they're capturing every single, at least communicating with every single eligible parent who could take part in the scheme, to make sure to say, look, get in. You don't have to contribute a maximum amount from your salary. You can put in the minimum amount, just so that you're part of it. So that when you are, when TFC kicks in and ESC closes, you actually have a choice. So there's that side of it. But also, don't forget the more employees that an employee gets on a scheme, the more NI savings they're going to make between now and April 2018. And if they can lock that in and keep the education piece going post April 2018 to say, look, we still believe as a provider that around 80% of parents who currently take part in ESC are going to be better off staying in it. I know there's factors, but a very large majority of people are going to be better off staying in ESC. So if they can keep banging the drum along those sorts of lines, that's going to help them retain some NI savings as well.
Fantastic. And I know that when we talk about getting buy-in from senior management about promoting these things and investing in these things, I know, for example, we've been working on apprenticeship funding at the moment. At the moment, I mentioned national insurance contribution savings to my finance director. He suddenly stood up and took a lot more interest. So no, that's a really good thing to talk about when you're talking to your senior leaders. Jennifer, again, I'm guessing that when you're talking to companies, when My Family Care are talking to companies, we're talking about opportunities here, aren't we, and the ways that the employers can benefit from this.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the privileged position that the employers that approach us are the employers that are leading the way and wanting to do the best they can. They see it as a competitive edge. They see it as part of being an employer of choice. So they're less about covering themselves and more about how do we enable our people, how do we have people really performing at work and confident and staying with us because we are helping them balance their lives. But I can see there's lots of questions, James, coming in about the details of all of these both new schemes, and I'm thinking we need to reiterate that we'll be publishing an FAQ guide, but there are a few questions that we might be able to address.
Absolutely.
Here.
Let's turn. Okay, let's turn to questions now. We've got just under 10 minutes left, about 8 minutes left to talk about to address your questions. Thank you so much for sending these in. As always, with InsideHR, and particularly when we work with My Family Care on some of these policy changes, we do get a huge number of questions, and obviously we won't be able to answer all of them, but as Jennifer rightly says, we are going to be publishing some answers to the most frequently asked of those, and we'll be circulating those to you along with some of those links that Richard talked about earlier as well. So let's turn to our first question. So, okay, we've got one here. Just to clarify, will employers have to pay more national insurance contributions when people leave ESC? Richard, can I fire that one at you?
Well, the short answer is yes, in terms of the savings will reduce, so I'll end up paying a little bit more across to HMRC, unfortunately, as numbers dwindle.
Okay, and we've got another one here. Just to clarify, can an employer join the ESC scheme if they do not have children yet? Richard, I guess I'll fire that one at you again.
That was an employee, I take it, rather than employer.
Yeah.
No, I mean, obviously there are some mandatory things they'll need to put in when they register. One of those is having the children's name and date of birth, so they can't sign up until they've actually got children.
So the account is for the child this time for the scheme. I mean, I know we've been going on about forward planning and planning ahead, but that is some substantial forward planning there.
Indeed.
So no, you do have to wait to have the child first. That is a good plan. Okay. how often can employees change between the schemes? We talked earlier about sort of the April 2018, and that's going to be sort of the key date for when this is going to switch over. Richard, how does that work when I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but just to clarify, moving from one scheme to another?
Okay, so there's no restrictions between now and April 2018. That's important. So parents can opt out of ESC now and join TFC, and then join back at a later date into ESC prior to April 2018. But once that cut-off kicks in April, if you leave ESC, you then cannot rejoin it, and the only option you'll have is TFC.
Fantastic. Okay. Lindsay, one for you here. Do childcare providers who are regulated by Ofsted have to provide the 30 hours of childcare? Again, I know this is something you addressed slightly earlier, but just for some clarity here, what are the providers obliged to offer and not?
No, none of the Ofsted registered providers have to offer any of the entitlement. So a number are offering the 15 and will continue to do so. At the moment, 60% of those who are in the pilot scheme to trial the 30 hours are going to continue to offer it, and 40% are dropping out. So 40% of nurseries in the pilot scheme have said no, they will not be offering the additional 15 hours.
And you were saying earlier your experience has been that that childminders are more open to this scheme and are signing up to this scheme and are more likely to be offering these additional 15 hours. But that's not what you've seen across the board with other providers.
No, that's right. With childminders, so any parent using a childminder, because the fee that the government are offering to pay for that hour against what they normally charge is very similar, the impact to childminders is very little. So you will see most childminders are offering the 30 hours. With nurseries, as I say, because the difference in the fee and there are restrictions on what you are able to charge for and what you're not, then for nurseries it is more problematic. And then equally for preschools, a number of preschools have opted out already, and obviously the number is continuing to grow because, again, preschools are aimed at 3 to 4 year olds, so they have no ability to make money from other age groups, from the babies and above. So it's actually the nurseries and the preschools are the ones that you need to go out to and ask. Equally, you do need to ask childminders, but they're more likely to be taking the 30 hours.
Okay. If an employee is currently in a childcare voucher scheme managed through payroll, can they still stay in that scheme? Is it going to come to an end, or can they continue so long as they're contributing, albeit a minimum amount? Richard, I'll turn that one back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Simple answer is yes, they can continue indefinitely in ESC as long as they remain eligible, i.e. they have a child of a qualifying age and their employer continues to run the scheme.
Once the child, sorry, of course, yeah. Once the child becomes too old to claim that, any new children would have to be registered under the new scheme.
That's correct, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, good to clarify that. I'm not sure whether which scheme this refers to, whether this refers to the 30 hours of childcare, of free childcare, or whether this is talking about the tax-free childcare funding. But are families no longer eligible if one individual earns over 100k?
That's a tax-free childcare, Richard, isn't it?
That's right. That's correct. Yeah, they're not eligible for TFC. They can take part in ESC though.
Fantastic. Okay. Again, I know we talked about this a little bit earlier. We talked about the pros and cons and who would be worse off and better off. But Richard, again, just a little bit of clarity on which parents will be worse off with TFC.
Well, really, it's hard to say exactly, but we expect those who with higher earnings and have higher childcare costs and larger families. I know that's a very broad spectrum, but that's what we expect. The only true way to find out is to really drill down into that HMRC online calculator and comparison tool. It does collect quite a lot of information from the individual, so it's quite comprehensive. But as a sort of guide, as I said earlier, those with large families and high childcare costs may be better off under TFC.
Fantastic. And just one last one here. When can employees start the TFC scheme? Is it open now? And how do you open an account?
Yes, they can join now. It was opened up in April, initially for parents with children up to the age of 4, so it's quite restrictive at the moment. But they can sign up. They'd have to go via the gov.uk mechanism to sign up. I don't know the technicalities as to what's required, but I should imagine it'd be fairly sort of standard stuff around sort of NI number, tax code, etc.
It's virtually the same as those who are currently applying for 15 hours. The eligibility and the process to gain that code is the same process. So parents who are familiar with 15 hours will find the TFC seem fairly easy to do.
Fantastic. Okay, well, we are almost out of time. Jennifer, I'm just going to turn back to you and give you the last word here. And also just to talk a little bit more about the further resources that you've got available from the attachments button here and also from My Family Care.
Absolutely. Thanks, James. So yes, there is under the attachments button, there's a link to grab the downloadable guide, which hopefully will tell you a great deal that you've gathered today but want to read again. There is the free webinar which you will be able to point your employee population towards. That will take place on the 19th of July and we will make sure that we circulate details of that. We'll also put those details in an FAQ guide. I can see some ratings coming in for the webinar already and they're really high ratings, so I think you've found this really helpful and it's clarified a lot from some of the kind comments you've made, so thank you for that. And hopefully having the FAQ guide to follow up on some of the more detailed questions will be a further help. Having that webinar on the 19th for your employees with the ability for them to listen again on that link later will perhaps be a fairly full solution on communicating these changes. And then as an employer, making sure that you're thinking about replacing the big tick that you had around being a family-friendly employer. If you were providing vouchers, how do you replace that? And obviously, we're very happy to talk about how we can support you in that, advising you on no-cost and low-cost solutions, and obviously providing things like our portal website, the Work Plus Family Space, which gives you a one-stop shop range of support and solutions for working families. So do let us know if you'd like more on that. But meanwhile, you'll have all the information from the guides that we'll provide.
Fantastic. We are unfortunately out of time. InsideHR is actually going on its summer holidays now. We're away for a couple of months. We'll be back in September. In the meantime, as Jennifer said, you can check out all of those resources in My Family Care. But for more things on this topic and all other issues affecting HR and management practitioners, you can obviously go to HR Review website as well. Huge thanks to my guests, to Lindsay, to Richard, and to Jennifer, and of course to My Family Care for partnering with us this morning. I look forward to speaking to you again in September. In the meantime, from London, goodbye.